Thank you for being here tonight. I'm going to let the last few stragglers come in while we introduce ourselves. I'm Dr. Liza Warner. I am the chair of the Finance and Budget Committee. I'm going to let everybody go down the line and introduce themselves, and then I will turn it over to Dr. Abram Marsh and Mr. Bart Randall to take over.
Jason Tower, Chief Facilities Officer.
Matthew Townsend, Assistant Director of Capital Planning.
Bart Randall, Chair of the CIP Advisory Committee.
Maureen Sigmund, Garrisonville District, and I'm on Finance and Budget.
Abram Marsh, I'm the chair of the the Citizens Budget Advisory Committee.
Carter Fitch, Assistant Director of Budget.
Sarah Chase, School Board. I'm on the Finance and Budget Committee for the School Board, and then I'm the representative on the CIP.
I'll start with Dr. Marsh in the Citizens Budget Committee, if he would like to begin.
All right, I want to thank everybody for attending. As the chair of our Citizens Budget Advisory Committee, the aim of our organization, real simply, is to help the school board in developing the budget for our school district. And we do that through community involvement. The most important community involvement are our parents, our students, and the staff members of our respective schools. And so what we spend the entire year on is going to the various schools, meeting with community members, and helping them culminate with a report that we deliver to the school board just around the time that they are delivering their budget to the Board of Supervisors. As everyone just about knows, the Board of Supervisors is actually who funds the entire school district. And so our inputs with the help the superintendent and the school board provide context from what is important from our parents, from our families, and from the members of our community. So it's actually imperative that we get everyone's insights, because what we want is a fully funded school district that allows us to compete at the level that we are. We have the best students in the state. I say that because my children are here in the school district. We have the best faculty and staff in the state. I say that because my children are educated by those members. And so they need the resources to do their job so that we can produce the results that we deserve from our students into the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And as the chair of the CIP Advisory Committee, welcome everyone. We have several members of our committee here. I won't make you stand and introduce yourself, but we have been part of the group over the last several years that I've been a member of the committee for the purposes of advocating or presenting to the school board better ways of advocating for funding. You know, CIP, Capital Improvement Program, is desperately in need of funding. We have worked pretty hard on developing a process, what we think is a better way to advocate through the parents for better funding for the schools. So over the course of the last year, we have been to 9 different PTO/PTAs, and we have given them presentations, to 15 to 25-minute presentations about where we stand in the county regarding our funding for specifically the 3R list. And then we decided that worked from about January until about March. And we looked at better ways of being able to get to the parents. And so in August, we went to 20 different schools in conjunction with the Budget Advisory Committee to 20 different school open houses. And we had paperwork there, we had handouts there, we had easel with some pictures on there, all representing some things that the status of where we are in Stafford County regarding the CIP funding, that is. And then we made a presentation to the school board in September, and the bottom line is that over the course of the last 15 years, we've identified a fairly significant gap to the tune of about $120 million gap in funding that should have been to the board for 3R, the purposes of 3R, and that those things have not been funded. And so we are working this year to continue that effort, and then we're also going to be working on how to prioritize those 3R projects that come into the schools. We want to try to identify a nonpartisan algorithm that can be used and approached to every budget, every project, so that we can rank that project, and then there's some way for the school board to identify importance of a project based on the same set of standards. And so we don't see that necessarily happening right now, and so we're going to work on making that more of a priority after we've identified the 3R advocacy. So that's all. I'm not sure where we go from here. I don't know if there's some questions that the FAB has for us, Dr.
Well, one of the things I want to point out is there's no quorum for either committee, so I don't know how we're supposed to manage that as far as the meeting goes, but I don't think there was any issues to be voted on tonight anyway. So I think that one of the things the FAB wants, I'm going to ask Ms. Sigmund and Dr. Chase to weigh in, and then we will proceed. Sigmund?
Okay. I really appreciate having what I think of both sides of things in the room, because these are the conversations we have as a board. And we struggle with in looking at our CIP and how to prioritize, because we know what we need. Same thing with the budget. We know what we need, but how do we best represent that both on paper and out loud to our community and to our funding partners? So I really wanted to, I'm a super big proponent of the advisory committee structure. I think hearing from the people who are, in the field doing the work and focused on a particular issue and giving us that feedback is really, really important on what we should be thinking about and kind of what the word on the street is. Where do you see, our needs most are that we should be looking at? Are we on the right track? Should we be looking at something else? Should we phrase our ask in a different way? Is there a different perspective? So that's what I'm hoping to get from having everybody in the same room talking about our county's needs, because we have a lot of kids and teachers that are counting on us. So thank you.
Yeah, so I've been so impressed with both the CIP and the Finance and Budget Committee over the past 2 years in terms of the advocacy that's been provided and the help with, we've had 2-3 really record funding years recently, which has been great. It's a little worrisome as to what will happen this coming year. And I think, I'm interested in hearing what folks have to say. It's, being on the board, it's often feels like we just get to try to pick the best of whatever poor options we have, right? And so, 85% of our budget is salary. And so then the question is, what do we do with the other 15%? And of course, there's this other part, which is the CIP, which is a little bit different. But happy to hear what folks have thoughts about. I know for me, moving into this year, I'm very concerned about this 5-year salary adjustment that we've been working on for teachers, and we've successfully gotten through 3 of those 5 years. I would love for us to get through the 4th and the 5th, given that the Board of Supervisors asked us to do this in this staged way. But, yep.
Thank you. I appreciate everybody being here tonight, and I think that one of the things that We have a budget that's approaching $500 million, and that may sound like a lot of money, but as Dr. Chase said, 85% of it is compensation and benefits right off the bat. The most important thing that we can do is have a great teacher in each classroom. That is the most important factor in determining a child's success. But often when we have to make budget decisions, you know, we're always weighing, like Dr. Chase said, the least bad of, you know, two bad options. So I would like to hear what the committees have to say, and if they come across anything in their interactions and in their viewpoint. The other issue is capital improvement is a huge part of our budget, and we are always acting in a way of reaction. We're reacting to a broken pipe. We're reacting to a broken HVAC system. We're reacting to a leaky roof. It's very difficult because then we have to push projects that we may have wanted to do off, and we have to focus on what the greatest need is. So I look forward to hearing from you.
All right, thank you. As mentioned, I did want to say my committee does have quorum, so we do have enough individuals on my committee.
So you're in charge now.
Yeah. So, don't say that to a retired Air Force officer, you know. Yeah, because then we'll have like a 15-minute meeting, and then we'll be at the golf course. But, and I do appreciate that kudo. When we took, our committee, just as a little background, had been on hiatus for many years. We were reconstituted 2 years ago and immediately took the mantle of prioritizing our #1 resource for the county, which is our employees. So our advocacy on behalf of our community and getting our community involved was to help, at that time, Dr. Taylor push to get our educators the pay that they deserve. As many of us know, we live in Northern Virginia, but our pay was not close to Northern Virginia pay standards. And so that push definitely helped increase the confidence that our educators have that they were going to be compensated on par. And obviously it's a way to go, but it's definitely multiple steps in the right direction. The next thing that we attacked were our staff members. You know, those are our paraprofessionals, our bus drivers, and the like. So last year, our push was to help them on a similar pay increase. And I would like to say that we were successful in that. And ultimately what that comes down to is you have to show up. And what I mean by show up is we don't need everybody at every meeting, but we do need you at the Board of Supervisor meetings when it's time for them to make those declarations of what they're going to fund and not fund. And we were successful in bringing out the teachers the first year, and I love the green shirts that our staff members wore last year, because with a sea of green in the audience, our Board of Supervisors knew that they could not back down on that. And then likewise, we want to do the same thing again this year with that same priority, which is all of the other things, you know, that fund our schools. You know, we have students in specialty programs. We have students, I just saw earlier that we need new computers that need to be replaced. So all of those things that we need the insights from our community because we get out as much as we can, but we get so much from learning from you all, and then we're able to target that and then phrase it in a way that we're able to give back to you all when we go to those meetings, so you have the talking points to speak on behalf of our community, to let the Board of Supervisors know this is what's important to you. And I'd like to leave on this note, nothing meant more, I think, to the Board of Supervisors than when we had individuals in our senior community show up and say, I'm a retired teacher from New York City. I wish I had the woman's name, but she said, I'm a retired teacher from New York City. All of my kids are gone. No one in my family lives in Virginia. But I am out here because I know how important funding our schools are. And please make sure that you provide our schools the funding they need. So if you all can continue to share that word, and then what I want to do is hear from you, because that helps me and my committee, which I'm so glad, I think now we have just about everybody here, because we want to capture that and then provide that back to our leaders so that they can give us what we need. Because there's absolutely no reason that Stafford should not be the #1 school district in the county or in the state when we have the great people that we have within our county. Thank you.
Mr. Randall, did you want to add anything?
We have another focus. If you have some questions on that particular aspect of it, then why don't we stick with that for a second? We can start then. Once those questions are done, we can go to another focus. We have a couple of other things to talk about. So maybe if there's some questions to talk to that.
Anybody have any questions?
Sorry about that. It's not a question, it might be though. During the last Board of Supervisor meeting on the 1st of October, one of the presentations that they had was a proposal to increase county pay and provide hiring bonuses for what they considered specialized staff or staff that was difficult to fill. Now, it said county staff, but obviously that did not include anybody from the schools, such as teachers, bus drivers, paraprofessionals, et cetera. So I'm curious if anybody has been following what they're doing so that when we go to message, we can mirror what they're already messaging. I mean, I was watching their presentation, and if you take out county staff and just punk teacher or punk bus driver, it's exactly the same. I mean, it's the exact same message. And so I guess my input would just be, as they kicked it back to staff, I believe, for them to work on it some more, is just to follow that very closely as it goes through all of the, public portions anyways that they provide, so that we can mirror their messaging and say, hey, this is your message. This is your message from your staff, and just put teachers or, bus drivers or whatever in the middle of it, so that, to remind them that we are county staff still. We just come from a different bucket of money.
We actually, in last year's budget, tried to put differential pay scales in for critical need areas like special education and math. But we also had requested at one time differential pay for hard-to-staff schools, because we have schools that, for example, are out in Widewater, and to get there, teachers drive past 17 other schools. And so we often have staffing problems at specific schools. It's also in another 5 minutes you can be in Prince William County. So though that does create challenges for us that I don't think the county's fully aware of. I don't know if Dr. Abram or Dr. Marsh has a.
No, this is news to me, but I would definitely love to get that. I don't know how we would get that. What's that? No, I understand the recording, but I guess what I would like is, I don't know if we have a connection to the county's HR, because I'm assuming that's where this is coming from. Because what I like about that is I did discover that for instance, IT personnel, there's a different pay differential between county IT people and school board IT people. So, and I understand that the school district lost a couple IT people. I learned that through scuttlebutt with a couple folks at the schools, because they did the same job and they just moved to the But if I can get that, because what I would like to do, again, is do the same thing. And then find out with their HR what the respective career fields are, because then we can do and it just only has to show 5, that are the same, and say, hey, how are you paying, one group of county employees different than the other group of county employees?
And I would just say, I mean, this has happened in the past, right? This is not a new thing. And one of the things the county has responded is, well, you just have so many more employees, right? So to get the sheriff's department adjusted in terms of their salary, they don't have 4,000 employees. So I'm just giving you kind of what the response is, and that's why we have a 5-year plan, and that's why I want them to fulfill the 5-year plan.
I just wanted to add that I did not see that meeting, but I do track like the county's compensation. And last year, they actually did a comp study where they compared all of their departments to comparables, which we do on the school side, but because their comp study was published for the county, we did analyze like positions that we could kind of equalize, like in terms of like bookkeeper or like a fleet person, any position that we could line up, and compared us to them, which ended up exactly how you would have expected it to. And also in their analysis, where like the schools are very below market to other jurisdictions, a lot of their departments, like the sheriff's office, are actually like above market now. So I feel like that's a lot of using their own information to educate them. But the argument is, we just have 4,000 people, which they're still valuable people.
Yeah, the head count's not a surprise, right? I think one of the things that I struggle with in my role is we talk about all these pieces that build our budget. But the supervisors, they don't fund pieces. They fund an amount. And then it is up to us, my colleagues and I, to figure out how many if it's not a fully funded budget, what percentage of those pieces, or where do we chip away? So we can say, we want this differentiated compensation for hard-to-staff positions. If they're only going to give us 90% of our budget, that might be one of the things that they liked and we liked, and it still comes out of our budget because we need to make cuts somewhere. Sometimes they do attempt to, reduce our budget by a specific amount that matches up with a particular line item to kind of send a message, but that's not really binding. They can't say, I'm going to give you all of your budget minus $2 million because we don't like this $2 million expense that you have in your list. So getting some feedback on when we do have to reconcile a budget, we can't cut the same thing all the time. That's how we end up having a lot of back expenses for Chromebooks, because that's a place where we've kind of, where's Shannon? Kicked the can on those expenses. So we have to kind of balance even where we find economies so that nothing gets left behind for too long. And thank goodness we have great staff that can help us do that. But again, you guys see things we don't, so having more eyes on it is really, really helpful.
One of the other things that would be nice if the county would just cover our unpaid lunch debt. That's like a surprise bill. It's like your kid ordered room service and suddenly the hotel bill comes due and you didn't realize they spent $400 at the minibar. So it would be nice if we could even get some coverage on that, because that was $500,000 at one point. So those kind of dollars mean something in our budget. So it's not fun when we have to scramble to cover that kind of expense. Any other questions?
Hi, I am a member of the CBOC, but I'm new to the community. I bought my house a year ago. I have a rising 9th grader in high school, so I have a dog in the fight. Plus, I've always been involved in the community. I moved here from Ohio a couple years ago. I work for the federal government in an education aspect as an HR professional. So there's 2 things I want to bring up. One is us spending, since we have our budget people and a couple board members here, that 85% of our salary is going on the compensation, and I totally, you know, unequivocally as an HR person, believe in compensation parity. And when you think about right now, one of the crises that everybody is having across the board is teacher hiring shortages. And with that comes competition. So how do we set ourselves apart so that we can get the best, the brightest teachers to educate my son, who's a rising ninth grader? So that's one of the things that I'm interested in knowing, especially since the three things, there are several things that's important to me as far as education is the great separator. And so if I don't have him in a system that is producing the results that's gonna be expected from us employers, if he decides, let's say, not to go to college, which that ain't an option, then he would, you know, students should be able to leave high school in this economy in the way that we're kind of focusing back on blue-collar work and be able to step into a job and make decent salaries. And the goal of any community is the people you educate, you want them to stay in the community. And I don't know how anybody would stay in the community when we don't have the tools necessary to fund our school district. When I moved here and purchased the home, I moved from West Springfield, and I said to myself, okay, I'm gonna have to compromise, I'm gonna be honest, after looking at the results and numbers online and reading all the comments on my child's education, and do a lot more on my end, hiring a tutor or whatever is necessary, so that I could afford the housing. But everybody looks for the best school district when they're looking for a house when they have kids. But could I afford an $850 to $1.2 million house in West Springfield? Absolutely not. So here I am. And so it was just, I'm just being honest. I believe in being transparent and frank, and this is, you know, so that people know the thoughts of, I'm a community, you know, advocate and a person that lives here and have a reason to be involved instead of sitting in the sideline complaining. So what I want to know, my two questions after that is, how do we get to yes? That's my question I'm going to pose to the school board and to the board of supervisors. That's what I always say to my employees. That's my favorite word. How, you know, I don't believe in no. I know that's kind of unrealistic. And so when somebody says, no, we can't do this, or I say, how do we get to yes? So that's the 8 steps of problem solving. And so I don't know if that's been the path that we've taken to determine how we get there, because it is absolutely unequivocally unacceptable not to fully fund a school district. So if I say, well, we don't have the resources, then my next question is, what do we need to be doing to get the resources? What are we doing to attract businesses so we can get revenues flowing in here? What's the Chamber of Commerce doing? How are we partnering with people? Like, what, you know, I got all these questions because I'm a business person by heart. So I know what it takes to be successful. So my question, the last question I have is, how do we define success? So when we're doing our budgets and we write down all this, if we're determining, okay, I'm gonna cut this by $2 million, I'm gonna do this, do that, whatever. So at the end of the day, when I finish doing all my budgets, it's just like in county, yeah, your credit, your debit. How do I define as a business, of course, we're a school entity, that I was successful? What am I doing as a citizen to get my return on my investment? And I know I've heard that the city, you know, people don't like things to change. That's the one constant thing you can guarantee in life. There is going to be change. So how do we do that paradigm shift to get the community to understand? And that's why we're out there advocating for change, because yes, we may need to raise the taxes. That's a reality. Nobody, of course, in the economic situation we're in, but if you love the community you live in, you want to see it successful and grow, you have to spend money to make money. I know everybody heard that one, so I'm gonna be short because I could go on forever, but those are the things that's on my heart, and those are the things that's on my mind as a citizen and also with a student in the school system.
So just to give a brief answer to part of your questions, we began building the teacher salary scale under Dr. Kisner, and Dr. Taylor enhanced and continued that so that we are more competitive with Northern Virginia, which is where we are losing teachers to. So we invest time and money into training teachers to see them go to Prince William, where they can frankly make more money. I know that in early childhood, we lost a teacher recently, early childhood special education. She was offered a job at $20,000 a year more. And that's the kind of competition that we're looking at. So that's why, as Dr. Chase said, that the salary scale is so important. I think that one of the problems in Stafford is there is not a strong business base. So the tax base is largely residential. So one of the things that brings business is a qualified workforce. So to reach that goal, we have invested in specialty centers and training academies to try to develop that workforce that is more diversified and has different skill sets that are more, that are needed by employers. So how do we measure success? We have tried multiple ways of addressing the budget. We've tried asking for everything that we need, which that tended to make them very angry. And we've tried saying, okay, to the county administrator, what number are you looking at? And we tried to build a budget around that number. And that was somewhat successful. But it is helpful when we can give you the ammunition you need to say, okay, well, this is what the school's doing to attract more business. This is what, because there is a synergy between those two things. And we are trying to be more competitive. Dr. Chase, I know that this has been an issue near and dear to your heart. Do you have any comments?
Well, eventually we're going to segue into the CIP, but I think sometimes we focus just on salary, and salary is really, I mean, it's huge. But the other thing years ago that was very apparent is teachers want to work in nice environments. And it's harder, yeah, we all want to work in nicer environments. And so, you know, if you're worried about the air quality in the school that you're in, you might prefer to work in a school that has better air quality. So, I mean, it's all tied together. It's all part of the same thing. So, yes, salary is really important, but, you know, support is really important and all that. We're still very, very far away from getting close to Northern Virginia salaries. Where I'm happy is that we're putting air between us and Spotsylvania salaries. And that has been very productive for us in terms of getting a lot of teachers from Spotsylvania over the last 3 years. And that has helped a lot, but that may be changing soon, so, yeah.
So I think, you know, in hearing especially what you had to say, in getting people to understand, and I think people do understand, and I almost think that makes it worse, because they see how far behind we are, and it seems like such a big climb. But there's that saying that, like, a journey of 1,000 miles, it starts with a single step. So I feel like we almost need to build a little faith and hit that I believe button, isn't that what we used to say here? That this, and I guess that's what our 5-year plan was supposed to do, but I think it takes a little more buy-in to realize, like, you could fund our budget ask at 100% and we still have millions of dollars in accrued costs that have not been paid over many years that still need to be done. Anytime our 3R list is funded at less than 100% of our annual ask, those projects don't go away. You know, when we have to cut $1 million from our Chromebook budget, those Chromebooks don't automatically work longer. These are problems that we're deferring, we're not eliminating, and the only way to eliminate them is by literally eliminating them, by not using those things anymore, or by kicking it a little extra in the future to cover what we weren't able to cover in the prior cycle. But it becomes almost, or at least it feels like it becomes insurmountable, and we need everybody to kind of know that we're gonna get there, we're gonna figure it out. So we have to take the first step in that direction, because any step in any other direction is the wrong one.
This is related to your point about the business, just business presence here in Stafford County. One of the things I learned through Carter and for Chris Fulmer after joining the committee, the budget committee, sorry, is the equation that's used at the state level favors Northern Virginia and other counties that have a higher business tax is not counted towards the formula for the funding from the state to the counties. And so I don't recall if it's on the legislative priorities list for advocacy at the Commonwealth level to push for revisiting that formula, but I would just throw that out there as well.
One of the things that came out a few years ago was called the JLARC study, which the JLARC study basically looked at the way that Commonwealth funds all of education and essentially said that the formula sucks. So it was a way of trying to normalize and create a better methodology. Because right now, Northern Virginia gets COCA at 100% funding. We get it at 25%. So it really doesn't make it very easy for us to compete. What would be the best advocacy would probably be to keep the funding levels closer to the JLARC study, which there is both, I think we have talked about it legislatively. We've also asked for 1% sale, to be able to apply the 1% sale tax, which would help us with our capital improvements. But also the VSBA is advocating for improvements using the JLARC study as a foundation for that.
All right, is this working? All right. I'm Jeremy O'Hara. I'm the vice chair of the Budget Advisory Committee. So mine's not so much a question. It's more of a blanket statement from what I've seen and what I've experienced, and a long time working in government as well. First off, put a group of people together who all have a similar interests. We're all going to agree on that similar interest every time. This whole room is people who care about this, and we're all going to agree and say this is the greatest thing. Across the street, they're not all school people. They're not necessarily going to have similar interests. And so we get to this point that we can all agree on all of this is important, and this is amazing, and everyone should know this, and they should absolutely fund this because this is what's important. But you're in a transient area. You have a lot of military, you have a lot of government, you have a lot of people in and out. A lot of people like me. Everywhere, many places people come from, and it is not a school division, it's a school district. And a school district has the ability to tax. So school board members, those voted in, you guys are where the buck lies. So we have a ton of apathy in this area when it comes to people caring about this. My kids get on a bus, they leave, they come home when they're supposed to, and they weren't murdered at school. That's cool. My day went great. So that's quite the reality of it. So in these people's minds, the buck stops with you guys. Because when I expect my school to be funded, when I expect this, when I expect that, they think you do that. If, again, we're all the people who think very similarly and want to see this improved. But because of this apathy and all the other people who don't really understand the system in which we work, which I didn't understand until I became part of this committee, they don't understand that there's another entity standing in the way. And quite honestly, you can have this conversation every single year, and this is never going to improve. The only way this is going to improve is, and this is really for you, the elected board members, until you guys decide to go on the offense, this is not going to change. You guys need to go out there publicly. You need to make public statements. You need to be in the newspaper. You need to put the blame where it really lies, because most of the public thinks this blame lies with you. Well, my school wasn't funded. It's the school board's fault. That's what a school board does. They don't truly understand this. It's not that they don't care and don't get involved. It's that some don't care, some don't get involved, but very few understand that you are not the ones who are really funding their schools. Until you guys get out there and publicly start making statements and putting the blame where it lies and putting out press releases like, hey, we have a building where scalding water just fell through and could have killed a kid, that it melted the wax off the floor, and this is based on the fact that we are not getting this funding and we are not improving school facilities, and we don't have this and we don't have that. This is what we've asked for. Here is our budget. We're being transparent. This is what we need, not only to keep the lights on, but to move your kids ahead and all kids ahead, forward into the next century. Until you guys go on the offense, this is not going to change, because it needs to be out there. It needs to be in front of the people who think it's you and don't understand that the pressure needs to go to them. They're not mad, they're not upset, and they're not going to fight for this. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. I just have a couple comments. Number one, I tell people all the time that the school board has the worst job. We are 100% accountable for the outcome, zero control over the funding. The state has a formula that they use, which is out of date. It hasn't been updated in probably 25 years. And the county kind of fits us in where they can because they have other expenses too. So it's not a great job. But anyway, the other thing is that, it is a challenge to educate people because they don't understand where the money comes from. But the problem is that we're in a hole. And you can sort of see where the hole started because the county used to fund us at about 60%, now they fund us at about 40%. But at the same time, we had two things that happened. Our buildings were getting older, and we didn't have enough space for students that were coming in and already here. So now, not only did we have to massively improve construction, we are building 3 schools, but we really need 6. But we also have to fill those schools with teachers and staff and cafeterias and security and all the other things that go with it. So it's just building a school is only part of the issue. You have to also put all the other stuff in it. Dr. Chase?
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of respond a little bit to the fact that, indeed, we are a room of people who are pretty much in agreement. But as I learned early on and was fascinated to hear, is the majority of voters and taxpayers in Stafford County don't have children in the schools. Okay, we are way outnumbered. So it's important to realize that people who've retired don't want their property taxes going up every year. And that's where the business presence is really, really important. But I also want to say, when we have a lunch debt of $300,000, some of that lunch debt is parents just aren't paying the bill. It's not that they can't afford to pay the bill. And it's because if they can't afford to pay the bill, they're not signing up for the government program for the government to pay it. So how do I message to somebody who's a retiree on a limited budget that they're supposed to be paying for the lunches of kids whose families aren't paying for their lunch and they have the money, right? So I am well aware that we have one view, but there is totally another view out there as well.
If I may, yeah, I am. So the, I'll put it this way, all right? There's absolutely no reason that the leaders should be not doing things other than lead. You don't lead from behind. As an officer, I was taught officers eat last. I told the school board this, and I'll tell you this. You don't shirk your responsibility by saying what can't, won't, shouldn't be done. As a logistician in the Air Force, we were not pilots. But you will never see an airplane not fly because of the things that me and my guys and girls did. And so when I hear leaders say what hasn't been done, what won't be done, what can't be done, I think of my children who expect us to do. They expect me to, my son expects me to be at the game this evening. All right, so immediately after this, I'll be going to a game of Mountain View versus Colonial Forge because my son expects me to be there, period. They don't, and our community doesn't need the excuse of, well, the lunch debt isn't being paid. Well, there are a lot of things that aren't being done. But we need to, as my counterpart said, give the messaging that this is the absolute most important thing you will do with your dollars. Because yes, you're correct, most people don't have children here, but most people in Stafford County were either graduates of a Stafford County school, a child or a parent of a former Stafford County student, or works within Stafford County schools. So we have the numbers. We actually have the numbers. We just haven't enlisted them to do what they don't know they need to do. And once you put it in the language, and that's what I'm talking about, once we give them the language that they need to advocate to, this is where we want you to tell the county to put your money. They will then, the people across the board will change their mind. You know, I've written congressional language that has changed where we have spent limited dollars in the federal budget, not because Abram Marsh came up with this brilliant idea, but because it was advocated by some people who absolutely needed it. Whether that was increases in funding for the pay of enlisted personnel who, they weren't running the Congress, but they needed advocates like me on staff, writing it in a way and meeting with congressional staffers that got the word over. So again, a lot of that is just said, we need to always be focused on those people out there who can't speak for themselves, so we can give them the resources that they need.
Yes, good afternoon. I just wanted to add to that because I was actually thinking along the same lines of Jeremy and Abram, where, one, we have an information gap. So the residents, the constituents, they're just unaware of what's going on. But I think what's really important is that we have stakeholders of the school system. We have various stakeholders of the school system. So obviously, the stakeholder we focus on the most are students and families and the staff. But other people in the community are still stakeholders of the school system, and we still have to meet their needs. And so I am an educator. I've taught in classrooms. I've been a district administrator. And so in places like Fairfax County, places like Montgomery County, they don't have this issue. They have people in the community who do not have students in the school system, and they are still engaged, and they still care about the success of the school system because they feel like they have a stake in it. And yes, our balance is a little different because of the number of retirees and all of that, and it's transient, all of that stuff, right? However, they still understand that they have a stake in the school system. And even like 2 questions I wrote down that we have to really take into consideration. What's in it for me? As a stakeholder of the school system, what's in it for me? As a parent, it's pretty obvious. As a employee, it's pretty obvious. But we have business owners or lack thereof. We have other residents, whatever the case may be, but we also have to kind of frame that messaging for people to understand what their stake is if they don't even know what it is yet. So if you're a retiree and you're in this area, maybe we need to create the message for them to understand what is our stake in the system. But that's something we can't keep running away from because other places have figured it out. Another question is, what's the return on investment? So again, if people are gonna raise their taxes, what is the investment that I'm gonna have by paying more taxes? Maybe if I know what the return is, maybe I'm open to it. And so one thing I saw a lot, particularly in Montgomery County, hey, my property taxes, I chose Montgomery County. I'm willing to pay these taxes because of a return on investment. So we dealt with a lot of that in the school system of certain expectation for performance because of whatever people thought the connection was, whatever their stake was. They felt like, well, the performance of the school system increases the property value of my home. I've done research on that. That's not true. It's rhetoric, but that's okay. That's what people believe, right? That's the perception. So I just want us to also just be a little more forward thinking and being more responsive to the community and just how the community is also changing here. So Stafford County, I've been here, 7 years now? And so I think probably 15 years ago, the community looked very different. But the community is continuing to shift, and we have to be responsive to who's living here now, that who was living here 20 years ago. And the community is going to keep changing because, you know, people are coming down from DC. I came down from the DC area. People are coming from DC. They're coming from Montgomery County. They're coming here for more affordable homes. They're coming here for more space. And we have to recognize that those people are now joining the community. And I'm a part of CBAC as well. And so conversations we've also had is around the developers, right? They're continuing to break ground. They're continuing to build communities. These people are coming in. And so as we think about kind of our issues and gaps with, you know, economic development and our relationships with businesses, I'm just very curious about what stake they think they may have as far as in this area. We just have to really figure out how do we get other people to see their stake in the school system so that it has more value add? Because right now, let's be honest, everyone doesn't care about the, oh, it's best for kids. Like, just be honest, this is 2024. Everyone is not committing to that narrative. People want to know what's in it for me.
I have to agree. I think that's an excellent point, but I think there is a tangible measurement of the quality of the schools and the value of your home. So I think that is a number that could be determined. I think the what's in it for me, I think that there are ways that we can show for not only businesses and employers that there are things that we're doing to help them, but also for the community, for senior citizens. We have arts programs and music, and there's something always going on that they can participate in. So I think that we have to be better advocates for how we do that. Ms. Sigmund, did you have a comment?
I think perception is the perfect thing, because I think, I've lived here for about 20 years. We've been raising our family here, but seeing things from even this side, we go through our budget process. It starts almost immediately after we put the most recent budget to bed. We start all over again. Well, then the county does too. So they're having all their conversations to build their budget, and then because of state law, we have specific dates where we have to present the superintendent presents the budget, or superintendent presents a budget to us, and then we bring a budget to them. And then the perception is we're tanking a budget that they've already created because they don't know what we're asking for, and we don't know what they have. We don't know what each other's cards are until this pre-assigned date by somebody outside of Stafford County. And we can't fix that, so we have to learn to work within that. But what it does is it makes it look like there's more animosity there than there needs to be. I know that we try to have individual conversations with our counterparts, but these are 7 individual conversations that have to be brought back to different committees. But the perception then is it's the schools that tip the budget. It's the schools, because if we want to do what we already decided, what we've been working on for months, that we feel are county priorities, and now we have to add the schools to it, and so it's the schools make our tax rate go up. The schools are the biggest piece of the puzzle. It should go in the box first, and then we fit in all the smaller pieces around it, like how I pack my suitcase, right? So it's a perception, because at the end of the day, all the pieces are going to fit together how they're going to fit together. It's just, we shouldn't always be last.
One of the things we've tried to do too is resurrect the Joint Schools Working Group, where we talk more directly to the Board of Supervisors, but that has not had successful outcomes.
Regarding what you just said, and then what Ms. Chase said earlier, how you feel stuck in a position to fight the fight that the school board makes you fight. Or not the school board, but the Board of Supervisors makes you fight. They put you in a position where you're doing their work for them, and they create a narrative like what you just said. They frame this as, well, you're tanking our budget, and they're quite content to use that to keep you in a defensive role, and then you backpedal the requirements and the needs for the system, and they don't have to do that because their concerns really are different. Your concerns are very much based on infrastructure and employee needs, and I think for most of the school board members, it's not a political concern, whereas the Board of Supervisors, you could say that there are political concerns, and so they're what drives them is not what drives you. So don't let them put you in a defensive role where you're cutting your own legs out and doing their work for them.
Thank you. I think that's an excellent point. I would say that the school budget is one of the most transparent budgets in the entire county. There is nobody else who has their budget posted online for everybody to look at. So it's not like the Board of Supervisors doesn't have some idea what we're looking for. And we always tell them, last year we had $50 million worth of unfunded departmental requests. And most of them were valid requests. So it's not like they don't know going into this. And we have tried to bridge some of those gaps in the communication, but we don't always have that partnership that we need to be successful. But I think I would like to shift gears to the CIP in the interest of time, so I will let Mr. Randall take over.
Yeah, when you talk about not having enough time, I'm not the one to be talking, by the way, just so we're clear.
Everybody who knows.
Just so, and everybody who knows, don't laugh, right? You're just ruining this. I don't even know where to start. We could talk all night. Yeah, you could, I understand, I got 15 years of history about how this whole thing got started and where we are and how we get out of this. And so I won't diatribe too long on this. We do have a couple of things I want to focus on. But the thing is, that to me, you have to change the paradigm of school funding in Stafford County. If you don't change the paradigm, it'll never change. So there's two ways of doing it. You change the paradigm or you change people. Elections have consequences. And so you've watched over the course of time where those elections happen, who gets elected, and then the decisions that are made with the board. Okay, how those decisions are made, who joins those decisions, right? Prince William doesn't do this. You know why they don't do it every year? They have an agreement, and what does the agreement say? They get a percentage every year of the revenue generated in their county. So if they get $1 billion, and let's just say it's not, it's more than that, but let's just say they have a percentage that says 40% of that money. So they get the money, and they write a check of $400 million, assuming it's 40%, and they give it to the schools, and then they stop. And then the schools are on their own to run their schools with that percentage. They don't go through this 6-month rigmarole of all of this, all the presentations to the school board, all the presentations to the Board of Supervisors, all the they don't do any of that. They get a percentage, they write a percentage, they get the number, they write a check and say, here, go run the schools. Don't come talk to me if you don't have enough money. That's your money. Figure it out. Now, does that change? Does the percentage have to change periodically? It may. I don't know. I haven't lived up there. I don't know if they talk. My guess is that Prince William does, or that Fairfax and Loudoun do the same thing. They got so many other things to do as a county besides spend 6 months wrangling over how they're going to fund the schools. That's the paradigm that has to change. Until that paradigm changes, this is going to happen and is going to have to happen, and you're going to have to go beg to the board every year. And depending on the makeup, you're going to get a Heisman, thank you very much, we don't really care, go with what we give you. Or maybe the board says, thank you very much, the makeup has changed, and now we care more about the schools. Okay, that has not been happening recently for the last at least 15 or 16 years. So that's the first thing that has to happen, right? If you really want to change it, that's what's going to have to happen. So we talk about what we do as a committee. And again, for my committee members out there, if you have something that you need to say, please, when I'm finished, raise your hand and we can get that out there. We recognize as we started this CIP process, just as you would if you buy a house and don't do anything with it for 15 years, that eventually you will become reactive in your process of your house or your car and not proactive. Let's just make it easy. If I don't change the oil in my car for 10,000 miles, no, with the newer cars, sometimes you can get away with that. Let's say 20,000 miles. For those of us that were old, even 5,000 was too long, right? But if you go 20,000 miles without changing the oil in your car, does anybody here not know what would happen to your car? Right? And then it potentially changes, and then when it seizes, and the mechanic opens the hood and he says, it's not a $30 oil change now, or a $50 oil change. Now it's a $4,000 engine. That's a very simplistic way of telling the county what we're dealing with right now, right? It's a catastrophic failure that we're fixing. And these two gentlemen over here, every time we have a meeting, it's another story, it's another picture, it's another fact of we are reactive to the process, not proactive to the process, right? We worked on a very detailed presentation that talked about an industry standard of 2.5% of assessed value, which is the industry standard for maintenance funding. That maintenance funding to about $860 million of assessed value is about $20 million a year standard for maintenance for our 31 buildings? 36 buildings. Do we think we get $20 million a year? No. We get $7 to $8 million a year. I'm not counting last year because that was a shock value. And you're not, unless you have another shock value, I don't know what's going to happen this year. But you get $8 million. By the way, just so we're clear, you get 1.7 roughly in cash. And then the county uses their credit card and swipes their credit card for another $6 million to give to the schools. They don't pay it in cash. They don't pay it in cash. They use their credit card to make up that $8 million. And again, it's only 8 out of 20. So that's the problem. And over a course of 15 years, we looked, and I said this in my opening, $123 million down because we need 20, and they give us 8. Last year, they gave us 14. They didn't write us a check for 14. They swiped their credit card again. They swiped our credit card again and added more to our debt. That's a whole nother discussion about where our debt is and what our debt services are and where that money comes from. Parent involvement, right? I would love to see, starting in January, 100 parents at every Board of Supervisor meeting lined up for 3 minutes each at 300 minutes and have those meetings go till 11 o'clock every night. And every single one of them, all 100 of them, talk about funding the schools, funding the schools, funding the schools. Because that message resonates, right? You'll eventually get them to a point where, like, yeah, we know we're gonna fund your schools. Could you please go away? We want to get home before midnight every night, okay? But that's what resonates with them, right? Which is why one of the things that we did in our committee was to go to the PTO, PTAs, and to go to the open houses. How many different parents did we talk to? There were probably several hundred parents that we had individual one-on-one contact with, telling them this story. Now, are we going to advocate, and are they going to remember enough that in January and February they're going to come to the meetings? I don't know. We hope. But there's 250 parents or 300 parents that know more now, to your point, than they did before. They have to be the advocates for this message. All right? Yes, we have a question. Yes, please, Richard.
Hello, everyone, school board.
It's on, turn it on, Richard.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you now.
I just needed to speak up, I'm sorry. Okay. Well, first, thank you for allowing us to speak with you tonight. I agree with everything I've heard tonight thus far, but I would like to call that gentleman out up there, if I may, Jeremy. I think you are 100% spot on by what you're saying. We absolutely must make our communications more robust than what they are today. I've said that in almost every meeting. I'm sure they're probably tired of hearing it from me, but I'm just going to be honest and direct. Our communications as it relates to this issue is below where it needs to be, and I'm stating it mildly, okay? As I think most of you in this room probably can attest, when it comes to things going on with the buses, buses being late or just not showing up or whatever, I get a communication about that every day. My question to you all is, why couldn't we use a similar tactic for what's going on with the issues we're talking about right now? I'm fairly certain if we were sending out a communication similar to that daily or weekly, whatever the cadence may be, it's going to get the attention of the parents. I promise you it will. These are the type of things we got to start thinking about, right? We have access to this technology, these systems at our disposal. Why not use it to get the message out, So that's one of the things I wanted to ask a question about or point out. The other thing, and I hope I'm not stealing our chair's thunder, but as he spoke to last month about, you know, where we are with the Triple R effort, you know, we're in a huge hole, right? It's not enough for us just to get our funding that we need yearly. That's only going to allow us to stay at our baseline. What we need is a one-time bailout to be able to bring us up to speed or to level set our budget. That's got to be communicated. We can get that $20 million a year, whatever it is, to be able to meet our baseline needs, but that will never allow us to be able to make up the gap. I think that's very clear to everyone in the room, right? So that's got to be a part of the effort. Then the last thing before I get off my soapbox is one gap that I think has not been identified, and if I'm off base, please correct me here, but one gap that I've brought up a couple times I don't think I've gotten a clear answer on is, has the school board looked into potentially looking into some type of warranty program that could hedge our risks when it comes to future damages in the schools, right? We know they're old, we know there's gonna be more things that's gonna happen, it's inevitable, right? So why would we not try to protect ourselves to prevent us from having to keep on taking on new debts that we believe is inevitable? So that would be another question I would pose, but, so that's all I've got.
All right, thanks, Richard.
I just wanted to say
Go ahead.
quickly that on a kind of a local level, we do notify families. If a school lost power for a period of time, we will send an email to all of the families that say, Rocky Run Elementary School was without power today from 12 to 1 because the electrical panel failed. We had a water issue, we had a roof issue, whatever it is. If something happens during the school day, we are messaging those families. What we need to do is really have a big old list. We have a delay dashboard for bus drivers. We should have a dashboard for, I would love to see a running list at the end of the year. I'm sure somebody at this table could probably provide that for me. But
I'm going to have Mr. Towery answer your question about the warranty system.
Yeah, no, it's a great concept, and we need to take a closer look into that, see if there's some options. My initial reaction is that I haven't ever seen that on a commercial level before, but it's something that we can take a closer look into.
Thanks. Do we have any other questions? Yes, right here. I know you've been waiting for a while.
Yeah, but I really like the build in the conversation, so I'm glad to go now. I think in our time remaining, I'm wondering if we can use it to create the action plan, because I'm hearing, as much as I'm hearing some really inspirational language, I'm seeing a lot of finger pointing, like you should. Well, like, who are we asking to do something? I think it's we as the committee members, actually, is what I think, because I'm not sure if I'm a citizen and I see Drew Middle School say, we're crumbling, help us. Like, is that allowable? I don't think so, or that's not a good optic. And I also don't know that our friends on the school board really want to get into a fighting match with our friends across the street. You have relationships to maintain. So I guess I'm trying to think about, number one, who's our audience? Who is our target audience? I'm hearing parents, maybe, maybe not, business community, the non-parent voting members of our community, and then ultimately the Board of Supervisors. So we as committees, what are we going to do to, and I'd love to hear the board's opinion, who is our target audience and what's the message we really need to get to them? And we as committees can really work on that message, right? And the strategy to reach them. And then the other piece about, I guess, and that leads, to apathy, right? There is apathy. There's a lot of misunderstanding or, lack of understanding. So what are we as the committees going to do about it?
Thank you for asking. I've been keeping a list. So one of the things I think I would like to task Carter with is to give the Finance and Budget Committee that comparative analysis that they have done of county staffing, so that you have a basis to look at, and it would help us. And then I will also have it sent to the FABC meeting so that we can look at it too, to see if there's any way, because we know that our service sector scale is also one of the problems we have. This was the first year we could actually enhance the service sector scale. So some of the dues that I have are also, can we get an evaluation of how, is there an equation or an algorithm somewhere that tells us how property values are influenced by the quality of the schools? Maybe there is, I don't know. So we're gonna look at the compensation parity. Maybe it's, I don't know if the Finance and Budget Committee received the information on the JLARC study, but that's definitely something that we could give to you, and that may help you formulate an idea on how to both advocate on the state level and the local level, so that we can work towards that. The other thing is that I will ask the the members who are on the Joint Schools Working Group to maybe start working towards a fund sharing, instead of going through this chaos every 6 months, which is what we do, is to actually establish a profit sharing. So this is what a revenue sharing agreement that funds the schools, so that we can anticipate what we're gonna get, and we don't have to keep going across the street. And the other problem we have when we do that is that the superintendent presents a budget to us. We look at the budget and we say, you know, I think we need more resources, not me personally, but we may decide as a group that we need more resources in transportation, or we need more resources in special education or ESOL. And we may ask for those things to be added. The other due I have is, and this goes back to changing the paradigm, which Mr. Randall talked about, and I think that's something that we can task with the Joint School Working Group. But once they've started to do that, that's something that we can carry back to the committees. I do appreciate Mr. Randall pointing out that we borrow a lot of the money to fix things. That is a really dumb way to fund what you know is coming. But I also agree with what the gentleman in the back said, is that we have to get to a set level so that that ongoing maintenance makes sense. But when you have a $120 million hole and you're only putting $8 million to it, you are never actually getting ahead. But we also have to be cognizant of the fact we don't have the business base that we need to fund the tax rates. So we cannot burden taxpayers with 40–50% tax increases. There has to be some plan. So the other due that I have is, I have to read my handwriting, so give me a second. I think the other due is that we have to have, which we have on the legislative agenda, is trying to get the 1% sales tax for this, which is another advocacy that we can get from parents to call their state representatives. So I think that the fact that you guys, and this is how we can work together, is that we can work with the local Board of Supervisors, but we can also work on the state level for the advocacy on our legislative agenda, which is designed to help with some of these funding issues.
Every
Yeah, so to the point, and then you're gonna hold that microphone so long it's gonna be attached to your hand. So we'll get you in just a minute, I promise. But to your point, as far as I know, that level of detail, that level of in the weeds advocacy has not taken place yet, right? And how that happens, how that could happen, you know, would the teachers be willing to advocate for things like that in a parent-teacher conference level? Would they look at, you know, here's why some of the reasons they're not. It's a trailer issue, it's a in the classroom issue, or in the hallway issue. It's, you know, we don't have a good music and art program. All of those things, would they be willing to advocate for, here's the final result, here's some answers that could help the process, right? Is that something that should be explored? I agree. We have only started through PTA, PTO, and open houses. Are there other avenues that we could get to? There absolutely are, and I think those should be explored. Thank you. Go ahead.
Hello, I just wanted to mention how important community advocacy has to be right now. Although you say that parents do get emails and stuff, they don't check them that often. They don't actually know. Last March, right before spring break, Fox 5 DC ran a story that the Stafford County School Board was planning to charge students around $200 to participate in varsity sports. That caused a ruckus. That entire week, everybody was talking about it. Everybody was complaining about it. Everyone was saying, hey, I already pay $800 for sports. I can't afford another $200. And for that week, it was great. There was a lot of momentum. I was talking to so many students. We came up with actually a list of demands, so to speak, that we wanted to bring up to a Board of Supervisor meeting about school funding. That actually never happened. However, I do think it's important to use that momentum to bring forth these problems. I do feel like we should go out to local press. We should go out to more Stafford community events. We need to push to families and citizens that, hey, this is a huge problem. Social media, it could be a great tool. The advisory committees could have some sort of social media account where they talk about their progress. I know it's like, I know there's so much stuff going on.
Can you slow down? I can't write that fast, right?
Moral of the story, just, there could be so many more ways we could reach parents, and we need to stop essentially babying the Board of Supervisors. We just need to go out to the county and show them this is the actual problem that we have. Are they gonna like it? Probably not. Do we have a choice? Not at this point. I'm sorry, I've talked to so many people. I've talked to, I go to Mountain View, and most kids at Mountain View have parents who work in Stafford County Public Schools. They have parents who work in special education. They have parents that work as teachers, administrators. They're all saying the same thing. The way the schools are funded now, they just can't continue this way. And I hope that you consider to go forth in some sort of insanely public way to prove how bad this is to the rest of the community and hopefully get some actual advocacy going. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
She's delightful.
Yeah, well, do we think that we feel any different presented from a high school perspective, presented from a school perspective? But in the end, that's the advocacy that every parent should feel, right? The question is, how do we take that message and disseminate that message to 30,000 kids and 50,000 parents, right? Because that's the advocacy that the school board of supervisors needs to see, right? It will get action. Movement like that action will get movement. Now, will it get what we need? No, it'll never get what we need. But it will get something, right? It will get something, right? Rodney Thompson has a catastrophic failure, and guess what we get? We get parents to advocate. We get parents in front of them before you know it, they swipe our credit card again, and we get another $6 million. So we have another question over here. Yes, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to share, I agree with your sentiments. And I think the board has a choice to make. I hear managing relationships, but to Michelle's point, who's our audience? Like, we can go out and tell our neighbors. I homeschool my kids. I had them in Christian school. They just went to public school after the pandemic. But I'm concerned about the schools, right? But I also know that I have a choice to pull my kids out if it gets so bad, or have alternatives. I could send them to private school. A lot of people don't have those options. But these parents, we can have them advocate. We can line up like the police officers did at the school board meeting. But until they hear it from the people that, you know, like, they have to hear it from you guys, the board, and you have to make a decision. And I think that we as citizens will back that decision if you raise my taxes. But I've heard that if you raise the taxes, they wouldn't even fully fund the schools either. You know, so we can't even push that narrative that people could agree to have their taxes raised and there still be no full funding of the schools. So I'm asking, who is our audience? We can line up all the parents, we can line up all my neighbors who are retired, who, you know, would come out there and do all these things, but I think it's here.
Well, in the end, your audience is the Board of Supervisors.
Right.
Your advocates are the other 158,000 people in the county. Those are the advocates, but the message has to be to the audience of the Board of Supervisors, because in the end, they have the golden purse strings. They are the only ones that advocate and allot funding, right? And so they are the ones, and so how do we get to them? How do we impact, how do we change their mindset?
Right, but we've tried that, and we've stood at those school board meetings, and we stayed there till 11 o'clock, and we argued, and we fussed, and we sent Facebook messages, and we did tailgating, and nothing changed. I think there has to be somebody else where you sit in those meetings to say, hey, these are our demands, and if you can't meet them, then
Yeah,
what,
well,
you know? Like,
So who are they accountable to?
they're accountable to the citizens.
That's
we,
right, and the citizens have to.
And I mean, this is
Sure.
will be my second year or
Sure.
first year voting in this county, but they are accountable to us. But I think they need to hear it. You know, it's not so much about managing relationships. It's so much about putting your foot down when you make that decision to say, hey, this is, I mean, and you do whatever you want to do, and if you don't do it right, I won't vote for you, right? And so that's the point that I'm
So the
getting at.
message, right, so that message does not get to some of the supervisors, because they vote
I
with
see them
no,
on Facebook arguing and saying,
they
hey,
vote with no consequence, no accountability, some of them, because of where they are. So, well,
Every
that's the
single-
question, listen, so every 2 years, you have an election cycle where Board of Supervisors and school board members are on the ballot. Next year, you'll have 4. 2 years later, then 2 years after that, you'll have the other 3. So if the 4 that are on the ballot next year have voted against the schools, that should be something that everybody takes into consideration when they go to the ballot.
So
Not the only thing, but that should be something that they think about.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond. So they are a political body, and I have one vote for one member of the Board of Supervisors, right? I live in Falmouth, I vote, I can vote for Ms. Bomke, or I can vote for whoever runs against her, right? And so if I sit across from the table with her, she knows I have one vote, right? So you all are incredibly powerful relative to my one vote. And I do want to say that everything that people advocated for the last 2 years has been incredibly effective. We have gotten more money in the last 2 years in terms of increase than we have had in a long time. So your advocacy has actually been very effective. The problem is, as Dr. Warner has said, we have an incredible hole that we're digging ourselves out of, and you can't dig out of it all in 1 year. So we just have to keep working on it. But I just wanted to let you know, I can sit across the table, and I will tell you, last year, I was very frank about the situation at Drew. And I outlined every single thing that had broken in Drew for the last year and a half. And other people came and advocated for Drew. And I'm extremely happy that it's now on the list, right? So we'll see where it goes. But we do the best we can. Yep.
I wanted to also just reiterate, as far as, you know, quite frankly, the 14 of us, when we run for election, we tell you what's important to us. Every single person on the Board of Supervisors, they have far more issues to cover than we do. We are schools. They have a whole lot more. Wouldn't want their job. But every single one of them mentions education when they campaign. And they all phrase it a little bit differently based on what their focus is or what really tugs on their heartstrings. Maybe it's safety, maybe it's performance, maybe it's capacity, maybe it's mental health. So when you are paying attention to what they're telling you, use that in how you communicate with them. If there's running on safe schools, how do our priorities get them to that, get them to their yes, right? Like, if it's mental health in our schools, what in our budget or in our buildings will get them to that? And it's a little more work because it's not a one-size-fits-all message. But when you remind them what they've told us or what we've told you that is important to us and the things we committed in our campaigns and in our speeches to the community that we feel is important, it's really easy to then use that as a basis to start your conversation.
Every single supervisor runs at the schools. They all want good schools. The reality is that, as Ms. Sigmund pointed out, that means different things to different people. But as Dr. Chase points out, your votes outweigh our votes because there's more of you. But the other thing is that as parents and as advocates, you also have a desire for what the schools should be. And it's important for you to communicate and say, you know, I'm not worried about safety at my school. What I'm worried about is academic performance. And it's important for you to be clear about what you want. And what we try to do with our budget, and what most of us, you know, we're accountable too. You know, I have no problem if the voters don't vote for me. That's okay. If they aren't happy with the job I'm doing, that is what they're supposed to do. So don't vote for party. Vote for the person who's running. And if you don't think they're doing the job that you hired them to do, then fire them. And that stands for any elected official. But especially on the local level, those elected officials have a more direct impact on your day-to-day life than anybody else. And change takes time. And as Dr. Chase pointed out, we have gotten more money in the last several years, plus we've got the investment in new schools, and the Board of Supervisors did that. They have supported that. So they are doing things that help us. But because we have to fill that hole, we need, as Mr. Randall pointed out, we need to level set that a little bit. We need to get that hole filled so then we can get into a maintenance schedule that is more affordable. And that requires local and state funding. And so, you know, we're working on that. So back to your do list, communication with parents and what the most effective way to do that is, I'm not sure. But I do think that it would be helpful if these two committees had social media and could do a rapid response and say, hey, parents, we need you to go to this meeting on this day and here's the key talking points. Because the Board of Supervisors is a political body. And so I think that hearing from parents, we advocate. I talk to almost all the Board of Supervisors at some point. I'm sure that many of my counterparts do as well. But we're only one voice. And they may not agree with what we're saying. They may be skeptical of our perspective because of the lens we see things through. So are there any closing statements?
And we got a lot of votes.
We are a body, a governing body. So as individuals, it is not good for us to do that. We would have to have a planned statement and we would have to have a spokesperson to do that, because I can't go out and say, this is what I think should be done, because that's just my opinion, and I'm only one vote on this board. So it has to be a governing board issue.
I wholly disagree with you. If one of you feels some way, and you have facts and figures to back it up, well, for me, it'd be my guy, I guess. I vote you in to go out and advocate for the schools. And if something is wrong, it's your duty to stand up and say it's wrong. You don't speak, you can speak as a board, and that's wonderful. But if you know something's wrong, then you should stand up in front of the newspapers, in front of the TV cameras, and you should say that as well. You represent my kids and the schools and the people who work here. And absolutely, that is your responsibility to stand up and say so. And all of us who work in public service have that similar responsibility when certain things happen. That's what we took an oath to do, is to do right from wrong. And if it's wrong, stand up and say it's wrong. And if they want to say, well, that's just your opinion, let the people on TV listen to it and make that decision.
Could I interject something real
Please,
quick?
please.
Before I worked for the schools, I worked about 8 years across the street, Public Works, Utilities, that area. And I, in my role over there, heard consistently from the community about stormwater issues or drinking water issues or public infrastructure issues across the board. And I know, I had pretty good pulse on what the Board of Supervisors was hearing on a daily basis, and it was all of those type of concerns. I can almost assuredly tell you, though, that when there was an issue with the schools, people were picking up the phone and calling their school board members. And there's a disconnect there because I do think that, we're sitting here tonight talking about how the school board holds responsibility, and as Dr. Warner said earlier, I believe it was you said this about having this difficult position of being, holding the responsibility for the performance of the schools, yet not really having the tools and capacity and power to sometimes address those issues because of the taxation authority. And I think to your point, Dr. Warner, when you have an issue with the schools, we need parents to not just call their school board member, but to also call their board of supervisor and say, hey, I talked to my school board member about this, but there's something going on in the schools I want you to be aware of, and here's where you, Mr. and Mrs., member of the board, come in to affecting change here. We need you to also take responsibility for this because they are responsible for our schools. They hold the purse strings, and that's a huge responsibility that I think we're saying as a community needs to be presented to them on a regular basis. So that's my thought.
We have a couple of other questions. Please.
Hi, I'm a senior at North Stafford High School, and I've been there all 4 years. Going back to the Chromebooks and overpopulation, I've seen the change. I've been told, oh, you're gonna get a new Chromebook. No, hold it on for 1 more year. And I've had the same Chromebook for 4 years at North Stafford. So it's kind of one of those things where it's inconsistency and you're looking for change, but then you don't get it because it's not communicated properly. And then you also have overpopulation. I have 5 minutes to get to my class, but it takes me 8 because there's a big swarm of kids in one section because it's inevitable, no one can move. So it's one of those things where we need to advocate for this because it gets frustrating. It needs to be put in perspective and be put in our shoes. You're walking through the hallways, why is it taking me 10 minutes to get to class when I only have 5? And then doing things like tardy sweeps and those things like that. The cell phone policy is fine. It works perfectly fine for me at least. But it's just one of those things where we know that we need to fix the school's conditions, but we're building new schools, start with the ones that we have first. I'm not saying North Stafford is pretty and beautiful, but I'm saying there's some things where it's why can't we start with what we have? And it's more so just the inconsistency and really trying to focus on the perspective of being put in the student's shoes, how frustrating things could be on a day-to-day basis. So,
Sure.
yeah.
Thank you. Yes.
So, excuse me, sorry. So democracy is based on the principle of everybody coming together, everybody talking about things. And when I hear you guys tonight talking about, oh, let's go out and just do this, just do this, that. I just think the more reasonable and the more and the better approach would just be to try and talk to the Board of Supervisors more, because when, like for example, if you're in like a bad, like if you're having issues with like your boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, right, and you just try and talk crap about them, like to your best friend, like let's say our best friend is like the parents or something, right? Of course, your best friend's always gonna be on your side. And like, for example, when we have our meetings, like when you guys have your meetings and stuff, and then you get like 2 views, and like you post something on like Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and you get like 1 like, that's not really gonna make a difference. So, and like I watch every school board meeting. So when, like the school board hasn't had a like 7-on-7 or with the board of supervisors for like months, like from what I know. So instead of us trying to go too much on offense, why don't we try and just try and have like a better discussion with the collaborate with the board of supervisors. Like for example, like going back to what I said about like getting like 2 likes like on a post or something. Like for example, I go to Brook Point, and when we did when you guys did the groundbreaking, like I think it was Tuesday, Wednesday, like one time of those days, I was talking to excuse me, to some of my staff about it, and then some of them didn't even know what's happening until like after it happened. And then when I asked them about, oh, what do you think about what's it called? But like the bus situation, blah blah blah. They don't really know what's going on because it's not that they don't care. It's like they just have a lot of things going on. So I think, so my question is, like, what currently do you have, like, excuse me, like what right now are you doing like to talk to the board of supervisors, and what can you like do more? Because like the fact that you guys haven't really had like a 7-on-7 in like weeks, months, that's really concerning. Because you guys should be like talking more, because of course like the board of supervisors, like your overseeing body, whatever, but you guys still matter to everybody in this county in like different ways. So my question is, what more do you guys think you can do to really communicate with the board of supervisors instead of trying to go on offense? Like for example, if President Biden wanted to like have Congress do something, and he just went on offense, no matter what, Congress isn't really gonna take that, because it's better to like discuss and just collaborate, because that's what democracy is all about. So back to my question, what currently are you guys doing to communicate with the board of supervisors, and what more do you think you can do?
Thank you for that question, and I think it is a lot about collaboration, and I think we do have to be better at it. We do have to be better at building those relationships with the Board of Supervisors. One of the things we do is we have the 3-on-3 Joint School Workings Group. We do talk to our counterparts, and we do have 7-on-7 meetings to discuss both the budget and the CIP. Ms. Sigmund, would you like to add to that since you're on the Joint Schools Working Group?
Sure. We do try to set up joint schools working groups quarterly. Due to the change in leadership on both sides of the street, those were deferred for a year. We finally were able to have a joint schools committee meeting, I think it was August, after they had named their replacement county administrator. We have another joint schools working committee. It's either next week or the week after, the 24th, or somewhere in that last week of October. We will sit down with them again. The 7-on-7s are harder because we have to manage 14 leader schedules plus the staff that needs to be there. Generally speaking, the county has far more meetings and commissions than we do, again, because schools are our only thing. It's just one of their things. So those are much harder to find time on the schedule for everyone to be willing to meet. I will say that we as a board do invite supervisors to come to lots of things. Either our individual counterparts or someone we might know has a specific interest. We'll invite them to events and to come to things. Some supervisors are more interested in that than others. So we do the best we can.
So I'll share. I had somebody in the community reach out to me about the refugee situation in Stafford County. And so I said, great, I would love to come hear about this. And I know that Dr. Young is very interested in that, being somebody who immigrated from Holland. And so I invited her to come. And so we sat down and had a conversation with this person and heard about some of the issues. And so she said, hey, I'm going to talk to Senator Kaine and see if we can get him to help us out with this. And so she and I drove up to the Capitol on Tuesday, and we had a conversation with Senator Kaine's staff person, who then said, well, you know, it'd really be good if you talked to the state and if you did this, that, and the other. But I think it gets back to Ms. Sigmund's point, which is if you can find something that somebody across the street is really interested in, and you can build that relationship, then you'll get more buy-in, right? And as Ms. Sigmund said, if you have this idea of, like, it's about the relationship. If there's something they're really interested in, and we've said, yes, we're interested too, and then they provide the funding, and then at the last minute we pull that funding back, then we've lost that relationship. And so we have responsibilities on both sides of the street to work to build the relationships, but then also not to renege when they've given us money for something to use it for what we said we would use it for. So.
The other thing that we do is, like Dr. Chase said, is we try to find things that are common interest or things that they're assigned to. So Ms. Gary, Monica Gary is assigned to the day school. There are questions regarding what we're going to do with the day school when we rebuild Drew, so I've invited her to go visit the day school and to discuss it, and then we have also reached out to Delegate King, who has an interest in special education, to see if we can get more state funding for the day school programs, which actually are more cost-effective. So the day school is built and operated, built by the county, but it's operated by the school, so it's a partnership agreement. So we do always try to reach out in those contexts to try to get better cooperation and to try to build those relationships. But that's an excellent question. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? I want to thank you all for being here. Mr. Randall, see, you didn't take up too much time. You did very good tonight.
I was on a monitor.
Did we have a shot collar on you? Dr. Marsh, I always appreciate your input. Does anybody have any final comments?
The only thing I would like to, excuse me? All right. The only thing I'd like to add is our requirement for a social media account. We have advocated for that. We have solicited that, and we need your approval so we can move forward. So that is something that we have, and I think, thank you, fellow Wildcat, for bringing up. I think we tag team that very well. So if as soon as you all give us the okay, we will make that happen, because I don't have a social media account outside of LinkedIn, so you're not going to reach me. But you will definitely reach all those individuals, as our astute Wildcat stated. So again, thank you. And again, thank you for all my committee members for attending and for your well-placed questions. Awesome.
Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. And I will send the dues and the request, due list and the request to both the chairs of these committees. Thank you.